Okay, well, good afternoon in Asia. Good morning to Europe. My name is Karine Lespaillondel. I'm the Executive Director of the French Chamber of Commerce in Singapore. And it gives me a really great pleasure to welcome you all to this Energy Infrastructure Construction B2B Forum in ASEAN, which is co-organized by 7 French chambers in ASEAN. We're very pleased that almost 350 participants registered to this event. Which really highlights the great interest for these topics and also for the region. So let me just give you a very brief overview of the program. We're going to have a keynote introduction and market overview by Hervé Ochsenbein, who's the head of Regional Economic Department for ASEAN at the French Embassy, which will be followed by Stephane Lecomte, who's Technical Sales Director at Dassault Systèmes. Then we'll have 2 series of 3 roundtables that will take place in parallel. So please note that they will be recorded so that the participants can still access them, of course, after the event. And last but not least, the roundtable will be followed by B2B meetings, which will take place from 4:30 p.m. to 6:30 to encourage networking and, of course, foster business opportunities in the region. So I'd like really to express on behalf of all the French Chamber in ASEAN, our deepest thanks to our platinum sponsor, Dassault Systèmes, and to our gold sponsors, Dextra, Engie, Legrand, Ménard, and Schneider Electric. Thank you very much for your support. And without further ado, let me welcome Hervé Ochsenbein first, and then Stephane Lecomte for their keynote presentation. Hervé, the mic is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Karine. Bonjour la France. Good afternoon, ASEAN. My name is Hervé Ochsenbein, and I'm the head of the Regional Economic Service for ASEAN at the French Embassy in Singapore. I'll now try to share my screen. And first of all, is it working, Karine? Yes? So when I accepted to give this opening remarks, I was not fully aware of the challenge it would be for me to give a presentation where I would have to pronounce the word infrastructure almost 100 times. For a French, infrastructure is very easy to say, but infrastructure is kind of a tongue twister. So I beg our English-speaking colleagues for their kind understanding. Many thanks again to the French Chambers for organizing this B2B forum on infrastructures. In my opening remarks, I would like to briefly discuss 3 topics. The first one would be stock taking of the current situation. In my second point, I will discuss what is usually called the infrastructure gap, or in other words, the difference between the required needs and the current funding dedicated to infrastructure. And I will then conclude with a word on the COVID crisis. Is it reshaping the landscape, and how? But before we start this journey that I hope you will find interesting and exciting, let's try to answer 2 basic questions. What exactly should we call an infrastructure? And what is the economic impact of an investment in infrastructure? First of all, what exactly is an infrastructure? According to the Asian Development Bank, ADB, infrastructure is defined as transport, power, telecommunications, water supply, and sanitation. What is the economic impact of an investment in infrastructure? It is generally estimated that a 1% increase in infrastructure stock translates into an increase between 0.2 and 0.4% in output. How much is currently being invested is a good starting point. And to do that, I will mostly refer to a very comprehensive report that has been done by the ADB, in which is called Meeting Asia's Infrastructure Needs. This report dates back to 2017, but still remains the main source of information for us. So where do the ASEAN countries stand in terms of infrastructure? The ADB calculates that with 41 billion USD invested in infrastructure, Southeast Asia has a very low infrastructure investment to GDP ratio at 2.5%. China's score, for instance, is around 6.8%. But then you have to go into very tiny details, which is exactly what the World Bank has undertaken in a report called Infrastructure in Asia and the Pacific, dated July 2020. To my best knowledge, this is the first comprehensive stock-taking of levels of supply, quality, and affordability of infrastructure services. The report focuses on three key sectors: road transport, electricity, and water and sanitation. So let's start with electricity, where the World Bank studies access to electricity and the quality of supply. So as you see on the chart, access level in the region is fairly high, with an average of 92.5%. East Asia's lowest access level country, Myanmar, with 70%, is limited by underdeveloped distribution and transmission networks, particularly in rural areas. Electricity access level reaches 100% in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam. 98% in Indonesia, 93% in the Philippines and Laos, and 90% in Cambodia. Also, internet connection projects have been developed, and cross-border trade is a key strategy for pooling regional energy resources. In a nutshell, the access to electricity is very high in ASEAN. One should not take this result for granted if one compares with some other neighboring countries. For instance, electricity coverage reaches 70% in Pakistan. On top of that, some of the countries in the region have made giant leaps in recent years in their coverage of the population. Cambodia, for instance, has brought total access from 26% in 2015 to 90% in 2017. When it comes to the quality of electricity supply, the World Bank relies on the World Economic Forum, which publishes every year a global competitiveness report. For this report, respondents score their perception of electricity service from 1, the worst, to 7, the best. Singapore scores an almost perfect 6.9, whereas the situation is less flattering in Malaysia, 5.9, Thailand, 5.2, Indonesia, 4.4, Vietnam, 4.3, or the Philippines, 4.2. Another interesting factor is the average time for businesses to connect to electricity services. This aspect is documented by the World Bank in its Doing Business report. In Singapore, you need 26 days to connect a newly constructed warehouse. You have to be a bit more patient in Thailand, 30 days, Vietnam, 31 days, or Indonesia, 32 days. But if you are really in a hurry, you should invest in Malaysia, 24 days, and avoid Cambodia, 179 days. Regarding the technical quality of the grid, one important aspect are the distribution losses. Here, the methodology is a bit different, as the data are self-reported by the countries to the International Energy Agency. On average, transmission and distribution losses in Southeast Asia, 10% in 2019, remain moderate compared to other emerging economies, where losses can represent up to a fifth of the energy produced. However, there are significant variations across the region. In Singapore, the transmission and distribution losses are estimated at 2% of the output. Then you find Malaysia and Thailand with 6%, and a group of countries at around 10%, Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, or Laos. The worst performance is to be found in Myanmar, 20%, and Cambodia, 24%. Reducing average losses in Southeast Asia to best practice levels, around 6%, would generate gains of over $4 billion per year, according to the last Southeast Asia Energy Outlook of the IEA. I would like now to touch very briefly on another aspect, which is the share of electricity generated by renewable sources, since Southeast Asian countries have great renewable energy potential. According to projections by the IEA, the share of renewable energies in electricity production in the region will increase from 14% in 2019 to 30% by 2040. But today, there are still significant variations. With 2%, Singapore is the worst performing country in ASEAN, the champion being Laos with 81%. The reason being, of course, its vast hydropower resources. Income levels are therefore not a good predictor for the use of renewables. Thailand stands at 9%, Malaysia and Indonesia at 10%, Vietnam at 37%, Cambodia at 46%, and Myanmar at 60%. As a reminder, the countries of the Asian bloc have ratified the Paris Agreement, COP29. Their NDC commits them overall to reach the target of 23% renewable energies in their primary energy mix by 2025. But Southeast Asian countries face the dual challenge of dramatically increasing investments for renewable energy while tackling barriers that hinder such investments, such as financial capacity or regulatory frameworks. After electricity, another interesting aspect to look at is water and sanitation. Many countries still lack widespread access to piped water, and there is a huge difference between urban and rural areas. To reach water security in the region, it will require that all of the countries of the region are able to benefit from good quality water, reliably delivered to the right place at the right time, with the risks of water-related extreme events such as floods and drought well managed. The effort and investment demanded to meet this challenge are substantial. With rapid urbanization and the evolution of cities into mega cities, there are new pressures on water that development of infrastructure struggles to keep pace with. There is also little doubt that the climate crisis will continue to aggravate stresses on water resources, with an increased likelihood of extreme events. The best performing countries in ASEAN are Singapore, with 100% of the population using pipe water. Malaysia, 94% performs well, and Thailand is not far behind with 70%. Vietnam, Laos, and the Philippines have reached a coverage of 40% of the population. But pipe water services are extending to less than 25% of the population in Myanmar and Indonesia. To evaluate the efficiency of the supply system, the World Bank uses an interesting concept, which is the non-revenue water. The non-revenue water measures the percentage of water produced that does not generate revenues due to distribution losses or failure to collect user fees. For this specific item, the record holder seems to be Malaysia with 35%, followed by Indonesia with 33%. At around 25%, Vietnam and the Philippines fare relatively better. The situation is, of course, far worse when one considers the access to piped sewage. Piped connection rates are very low, with the exception of Singapore and Malaysia. 11% in Indonesia, 9% in Thailand, and around 1% in Vietnam, Myanmar, and Laos. The last item surveyed by the World Bank is road transport. The World Bank uses an indicator, which is the rural access to roads, describing the share of the rural population within a walking distance of 2 kilometers to a road. This index is, of course, not applicable in Singapore, where you will hardly identify any rural population. Some countries have achieved significant rural access, above 60% access rates, like the Philippines and Vietnam. Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand are around the 50% threshold. The Global Competitiveness Report gives a good idea of the quality of the infrastructure with a scale of 1 to 7. Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam are perceived to have the poorest road quality in the region with a score of 3.2, 3.3. Malaysia scores a very good 5.5 and Singapore 6.4. So these are the results of the first, to my best knowledge, comprehensive stock taking of infrastructure services in Asia. I've only underscored the main aspects of the findings. You may, of course, want to read the full report if you're interested. Let's now discuss the infrastructure gap. As I previously said, the ADB estimates that the infrastructure investment to GDP ratio in ASEAN reaches 2.5%. In its 2017 report, the ADB has calculated two scenarios, the baseline estimates without factoring in climate change for the period 2016 to 2030 is of $2,700 billion, which means 184 billion USD per year, or 5% of the projected GDP for 2030. If we include the additional infrastructure needed to adjust to climate change, and by this, I mean mitigate carbon emissions and increase resilience to climate change, then the investment needs in Southeast Asia jump to 3 trillion USD, which is 210 billion per year, or 5.7% of GDP. According to the ADB Green Report Finance Strategies for Post-COVID-19 Economic Recovery in Southeast Asia, ASEAN countries will need to invest $3.1 trillion in climate-resilient infrastructure by 2030 to deal with the consequence of the crisis, as the pandemic has deepened the financing gap in the region. So to sum it up, ASEAN countries should spend between 5 and 6% of their GDP on infrastructure. And as I have said, that's at the beginning of my remarks, the actual figure is half this. And by this, I mean real spending, not the addition of all the projects that have been approved. There is a big gap between the required investment and actual spending. The main reason for that, according to a PwC report on understanding infrastructure opportunities in ASEAN, is poor project planning and complicated procurement process. But whatever the reasons, the challenge that ASEAN countries are facing now is to double their efforts. The COVID-19 crisis has shown us that this is a vital and difficult challenge and that the new investments should go greener. And this is the last point I would like to discuss now, which is the necessity of a green recovery. With the COVID-19 crisis, a stronger sense of fragility has made governments and people increasingly aware of high impact shocks. It has been calculated that of all the stimulus packages that have been announced worldwide, 1/3 in average is expected to be spent in sectors that impact the environment. The COVID-19 disruption has clearly demonstrated that abnormal risks can happen and that green investments are now desperately needed. Now, there is a paradox here. Everybody believes that the recovery must be green, but the economic recession has undercut tax revenue collection, even more so that tax relief has been a big part of the fiscal stimulus packages launched by the government. So where will the money come from? Resource requirements are beyond the means of the public sector. Private sources will have to join. Moreover, the achievement of the UN Sustainable Development Goals in Indonesia, the Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia represents more than 500 billion USD of private opportunity in infrastructure by 2030, according to Standard Chartered Bank. The bank focuses on the SDGs concerning access to water, energy, transport, and digital technology. So the ASEAN country with the most opportunities, according to the bank, is Indonesia, followed by the Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia. So you see all the details on the charts on my screen. In this context, green and social finance can help the region address the challenge of achieving greener and more inclusive growth, taking account ESG considerations, and for sure, advanced economies are still the more active players for green and social finance, but Asian economies are catching up rapidly. Asia is becoming a hub of global green bond markets with a fifth of global green bond issuance. But Asia also leads in markets for green Islamic bonds, sukuks, aiming at financing environmentally friendly projects while observing Sharia restrictions. The first green sukuk has been issued by Malaysia in 2017, and from 2017 to 2020, $10 billion worth of green sukuks have been issued, Indonesia leading the way with 54% of the total. So to summarize my different points, I would like to give you three key messages, which are first, the need for, I stopped the screen sharing. Yeah, the needs for infrastructure in ASEAN are simply gigantic. Second point, in the future, the economic growth has to be much greener than it was in the past. And third key message, if you have innovative solutions, technologies, or if you provide services in this sector, then the ASEAN world is yours. Thank you for your attention. Karine, back to you.
Thank you very much, Hervé. I'd like to give the mic to Stephane.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity given for us to present what we can do as Dassault system. I will share my screen. Here we go. Okay, so my name is Stephane Lecomte. I'm the technical sales director for Dassault System, and I'm based in Singapore. And so thanks for your three takeaways, Hervé, because I think it's a perfect transition for what Dassault System can provide to this part of the world in terms of, I will say, innovative platform to support this kind of infrastructure development. So I want just to have a 5-minute introduction of what Dassault System is doing in this infrastructure, construction and energy sector, and how we can provide digital technology called the virtual twin to support the sustainability and the sustainable innovation as part of this needs for greenery and a greener development in terms of infrastructure in ASEAN. Okay, so at Dassault System, we are providing virtual universe. And we are a purpose-driving company in which we are saying that by providing this platform, we enable business and people with 3D experience virtual universe to imagine sustainable innovation in order for them to harmonize product, nature, and life. Meaning that we are providing digital technologies through virtual twin approach in order for us, the people, the user, the business, the university, the workforce of the future, to better understand the impact and the link between the product, the nature, and the life, and to ensure that the way we are developing the new product, the new asset, the new infrastructure will be sustainable and will not jeopardize the future of the next generation. Okay, so what we believe is that back in 2015, the United Nations decided to commit on the 2030 horizon in terms of sustainable development. And as you can see on this 70s initiative, some are linked to the energy, the economic growth, innovation infrastructure, sustainable cities and communities, as well as responsible consumption. We believe at Dassault System is that if we can connect the dot between those different initiatives, we can provide better decision-making, I will say, workflows in order to ensure that we can reach this 2030 horizon, especially by supporting a new way to develop infrastructure, construction, and energy access in ASEAN. So our conviction is that when we have those virtual universe, when we are able to combine the different stakeholders, meaning the people, the process, and the actors, we can imagine, design, and provide to the market new product, new material, and new processes, new manufacturing processes in order to sustain the growing economy and to be as fast as possible in order to define and to achieve those goals. If you look at the virtual twins, we discover that there is a shift in the way our customers are developing their new product, new asset, and we call it the experience economy. In fact, all the businesses are using today digital technology in order to ensure that they can model complex systems such as cars, such as cities, such as a healthcare system, and they are able in a virtual world to simulate the way they can commission those products. And those virtual technology enable also users to go faster in the way they are supporting their sustainable innovation, in the way that they are able to connect directly the ideas to the creation framework. As a takeaway, as of today, 85% of the electrical vehicles and more than 75% of the wind powers are made, design, test, simulate, validate, build virtually using the virtual twin technology from Dassault Systèmes. And we also are proud to say that we are supporting the first solar airplane using Dassault Systèmes technology. In a nutshell, if you look at the worldwide impact on the different, so we selected five domains in terms of energy, building, industry, transport, and agriculture. You see the impact on the global emission in terms of carbon footprint. And what is very interesting for us is that if you have a virtual twin of the different assets here, so you can connect the physical assets, gathering all the data to feed the digital twin in order to aggregate all the information to what we call a command and control, I will say a control cockpit, in order to see the impact of those different assets, those different components on the life. And we ensure that we can be more resilient, more sustainable, more livable, and more, I will say, green in the future. What is very important as well is that as soon as you manage to gather those data from the physical asset, you can simulate what-if scenario leveraging the digital twin technology, and you can send feedback loop in order to have a better asset, and you have a positive impact on the way you will define the next generation of the asset. If you look at the way we are able to quantify the impact on the next generation of sustainable components, if we look at those examples, so one is linked to the buildings. So if we are able to reduce by 30 to 80% of the energy consumption for the buildings, if we are able to change the way we are designing the packaging of the consumer products, if we are able to accelerate the time of to go to market with new mobilities capabilities, if we are ensuring that we can leverage and reduce the waste, the pollution, and the impact on the environment of what we are doing in terms of manufacturing, as well as if we are enabled to reuse through the circular economy the waste and to reuse the thing, with Accenture, we believe that we can have an economic impact of $1.2 trillion USD, and we can have an impact on the CO2 emission of 7.5 gigaton by 2033. Okay. As a nutshell, if we are able to develop the virtual twin capacity of the infrastructure, the construction, and the energy, we are able to sustain the development of new technology in order to ensure that we can be, as mentioned by Hervé, greener in the way we are developing the infrastructure in a more sustainable way, and we can be in a better shape in order to support the way we are transforming the digital innovation, ensuring that those virtual twin technology can enable a better future for the next generation. Okay, I encourage you to connect in 1 hour to because I will go in the deeper detail on what are the benefits of the virtual twin technology to support the new development of infrastructure, construction, and energy. Okay, thanks for your time, and open to any question.
Thank you very much, Stephane. Thank you, Hervé, for your keynote introductions. Now we're going to start the three first roundtables, which will take place in parallel until 3:45 p.m. So please select on the program and join the roundtable that you're interested in. And at the end of the first session, you can then choose your second roundtable, which will take place from 3:45 to 4:30 p.m. So I wish you all a very successful event and very productive meetings as well. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye.